Some viewers may find this content disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Who dares awaken me from my slumber? It is my creatures of the night. Yes, you have once again returned to the Fox Den for another episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on StarFox Radio. We are once again in my neck of the woods, the 207, with some straight up nightmare fuel. I really need to charge up for this one. As previously stated, this is gonna be a messy one. Well, that was just a little messy, but I'm talking about the encounters that we are heading to Maine to deal with. We will see you on the other side of the darkness.
Maine, the land of 17 million acres of forest, 3,500 miles of coastline, 5,000 rivers and streams, and an additional 6,000 lakes and ponds. This state has the highest density of land covered by trees per capita at 90%, making it the most wilderness-filled state in America. For hundreds of years, there have been sightings of dogmen all over Maine, in areas ranging from Acadia to Moosehead, all the way to the Rangeley Game Reserve, and even numerous campgrounds. 1857, 20 miles outside of Bangor, Maine, a mail carrier and very respected local man named Mr. Mitchell was completing his daily deliveries in a horse-drawn wagon when suddenly the postman and his horses were attacked by a pack of large, walking wolves who were overtaking his horses with ease until he began to fire his rifle several times at the beasts, forcing them to retreat back into the dense forest. July 1906, the Lewiston Daily Sun reports a large walking wolf is seen by local pickers in the farm fields, and it has been deciding to terrorize the workers as they're trying to finish the fields, so much that many of the pickers have refused to go back to work. 1976, Route 2, westbound, Wilton, Western Maine. Mary is headed home one evening with her windows down, going about 35 miles per hour down a remote road, enjoying the beautiful weather. The road Mary is driving on is completely surrounded by dense wilderness on both sides, giving the feeling that the trees are closing in on you. There were no other vehicles on the road, and just Mary with her music and the drive ahead. The young woman is really enjoying this ride home, and during this beautiful warm night, as dusk approached, when suddenly, out of nowhere, she begins to feel an awful chill hit her right to the soul. It was summer and a beautiful warm evening. She was confused. Why am I feeling this evil chill? Where did it come from? So she rolled her windows up. 5 minutes later, she hears a thud on her driver's side window. Looking over, to her horror, she sees an enormous, black, dog-like animal with a massive head that looked like an overgrown German shepherd with 2 red eyes running beside her car. As Mary sped up, the creature began pressing its face up against her window, showing her its teeth as it curled its lips back. Mary felt like this creature had so much hate and aggression towards her, and if she had slowed down or had toiled not to roll her window up, this animal would have snagged her out of her driver's side window with ease. Being extremely mortified, Mary swerves her car over towards the animal in a desperate attempt to break the animal's pace. As she swerves, the increasing speed and acceleration of her car trips up the animal. As it stumbled to regain its balance and composure, it then decides to break off into the forest. It wasn't until Mary got a smartphone in 2018 that she learned about what it was she had seen that dreadful night back in 1976. It was the mysterious creature we now know as the Dogman. 1988, Allagash Wilderness Waterway, Maine. A group of friends are setting up their campsite when they see a dark, black, large, werewolf-like creature with glowing red eyes watching them from nearby, causing the group to quickly pack up and drive home. 1991, 11 p.m., Litchfield, Maine. Martha Stevens David is woken up out of a dead sleep to scratching at her window and the sound of something seemingly playing with her curtains. Chalking it off as the wind and her exhaustion, Miss David closes her eyes again until suddenly she snaps awake. But this time, the sounds are snarls, and the overwhelming feeling of being in terrible danger have embraced her. Quickly rolling over and shaking her husband, Leo, awake, she begins to tell him what she just heard. Still groggy and trying to wake up, Leo is shocked to also begin to hear sounds and heavy breathing, sounding like whatever this creature was had journeyed a very long way to get to their open window and now was peering in at them. Being lifelong Mainers and loving the outdoors, the Davids are very familiar with the sound of all local wildlife and said this was nothing like anything they had ever heard before. After what seemed like forever, Martha and Leo heard the mysterious animal run off into the darkness of the night. October 1994, Bangor, Maine. A group of teens are out driving one evening when they see an enormous brown, shaggy, wolf-like creature the size of a grizzly bear crawling across a road like a military style into the brush 15 yards in front of them. Friday, June 23rd, 1995, Rangeley Lake State Park, Maine. Lee Bucher, Mike Ratcliffe, Nathan White, Luke Gray, and Sean Elliott had all freshly graduated from Gold Academy and have decided to take a weekend camping and hiking trip. After the long ride to their destination, the 5 friends got out of their cars, gathered their gear, and began the long hike to their campsite. After setting up the tents, the men ate dinner, and Lee agreed to go down to the stream to fill a bucket with water to put out the fire before bed. As Lee is finishing up, he begins to hear loud twigs snapping in an area of thick brush and trees. Stopping dead in his tracks, he turns to catch a massive black wolf creature slowly moving behind a tree. While standing there, trying to figure out what he had just witnessed, Lee begins to notice the forest has become dead silent. Brushing it off as nothing, he returns to his friends. At around 9 p.m., the campfire has just burned down to the coals, and as the group is entering their tents, they hear a very loud, human-like dog howl, followed by a blood-curdling scream, sounding like a person in danger. Knowing they aren't supposed to be wolves in Maine, the men are baffled by the howling and begin shining their flashlights in the direction of the howling animal. To their horror, they begin to hear the footsteps of something gigantic walking towards them, as it was making loud crunching and cracking noises as the sticks and fallen branches and pine cones were being crushed under its massive weight. Suddenly, they see an enormous werewolf-like creature leap out from the nearby tree line and land directly in front of the men. Not knowing how to react, the group stands there in disbelief, hearing two loud pops. The animal now suddenly pushes itself up from all fours onto two large, enormous, bent-back legs and begins charging the group. Mike pulls out his machete and begins waving it at the beast while screaming at the top of his lungs, "Get the out of here!" Not heeding the man's warning, the creature easily grabbed a hold of Mike with his two massive human-like arms and raccoon-like hands. Screaming out in horror for his friends to help, Mike begins trying to hack at the dogman with his machete. Angered by this, the animal grabbed the screaming man and rips him apart. Having witnessed their friend being brutally and now covered in a pool of his blood and chunks of his flesh, the four remaining friends begin screaming. As if to find their horror and trauma humorous, the dogman proceeded to dart towards the rest of the group. Luke was the next victim, as the creature latched onto the man and began ripping massive chunks of flesh from the man's neck and torso. As Luke began to choke on his own blood, he begged his two friends to save him before slowly dying. Nathan and Sean looked over at Lee and screamed, "Let's get the out of here," still having their flashlights and hoping the animal would be content with already Mike and Luke. The three men began running as fast as they could in the direction of their vehicles. Nathan and Lee had reached the edge of the forest, breaking into a clearing when they noticed Sean isn't with them. Stopping for a second, they then noticed Sean still is nowhere to be found. Shouting for their lost companion, there was no answer. Hearing the creature looming in the distance, the two remaining friends got into their car and quickly drove to a local store to call the To this day, the remains of Mike and Luke have never been found, and nor has Sean. 2001, Oxford County, Maine. It's late one night. A woman who is a night owl is up watching television when suddenly she begins to hear howling dog sounds coming from what sounds like right outside their home. Getting up and looking out the window, the woman is mortified to see an enormous black, wolf-like creature with a large German Shepherd head and red eyes sitting on the neighbor's roof, looking right in at her. Running in the other room to wake up her husband, he said it was nothing and quickly fell back asleep. Running back to the living room, the woman saw the creature had left its rooftop perch. She was so scared, she closed her curtains and made sure all the doors and windows were locked. 2004, Auburn, Maine. Leo Doyon stepped out onto his porch one morning to have a cigarette and coffee. As he is looking around and enjoying his morning sunrise, Doyon spots an enormous, large, black bipedal wolf-like creature with red eyes standing on two legs, looking right at him. After a few seconds, the animal turns around and sprints off into the woods. 2005, Wales, Maine. It's the middle of the night, and Leo Michaud is suddenly awoken to his female Doberman Pinscher Guard dog going crazy outside. Grabbing his flashlight, Michaud ventures outside to inspect the problem. He looks around, but doesn't find what it is that's causing his dog to freak out. Returning back inside, Michaud falls asleep, very confident his young, healthy, 65-pound Doberman will be just fine. Suddenly, just before dawn, Leo jolts up to the sound of his dog screaming in horrible pain and agony. Scrambling around again to gather his gun and flashlight, Leo runs outside and finds his dog covered in blood, all cut to hell from large scratch marks, and curled up in the corner of her doghouse. Upon further inspection, he found she was barely breathing, and after the trip to the vet, she had to be put down. 3 days later, around 2:30 a.m., Leo is driving down the isolated road to his house when he sees what he said looked like a werewolf from The Howling, trying to look under his door and messing with the door handle. After seeing his headlights, the creature turned and leapt off the porch and towards Michaud's car and proceeded to slowly circle the vehicle before dashing off into the brush. The following day, Michaud searched all around his property until he found these weird holes covered in brush and branches that looked like a den leading deep into the ground. Feeling very unsafe for his children and himself, Leo spent the majority of the day plugging up and destroying the strange den and the surrounding area of dense brush. Spring 2007, Madawaska Road, Palmyra, Maine. The Martin family, consisting of Eric Martin, his wife Shelley Rockwell Martin, and their daughter, have recently moved into an old farmhouse. As winter was ending and it was becoming nice out, the daughter and her boyfriend, who came up to visit for the day, as well as the family dogs, set out to explore their newfound property. About a mile away from the farmstead, the young couple found what looked to be a den belonging to some sort of large animals. As they approached the den, their dogs suddenly pinned their ears back and bolted away in the direction of the farmhouse. The couple, as they walked towards the den, claimed it reeked of dead meat, a wet dog, and fox piss. Peering inside the den, they began to hear loud growling, sounding like enormous dogs. They themselves made a dash back to the farmhouse. Later that night, Mr. Martin and his wife were outside enjoying the evening when 5 wolf-like creatures were caught crouching down and staring at them from a field about 25 yards away from their front porch. Eric and Shelley darted inside and woke up their sleeping daughter to tell her what had just happened. Totally startled, the family's nightmare had only just begun to unfold. Throughout the night, the Martin family's farmhouse was under siege by a pack of dogmen that stood around 6 to 7 feet tall and ran on 2 legs with long, human-like arms and raccoon-like hands, also featuring massive teeth and enormous claws. As the night unfolded, the Martin family heard terrifying howls and claimed it sounded like these animals were somewhat talking to each other back and forth in snarls and strange canine-like sounds as they were trying to figure out a way into the farmhouse. The Martins claimed the dogman tried the doors, the windows on the first floor, to see if they were unlocked, and once discovering they couldn't gain entrance, they proceeded to jump up to the second-story roof, which looped around the farmhouse, and began to try looking into the windows. The following morning, Eric and Shelley documented huge 5-digit scratches all over their doors and property, and mysterious canine footprints as well. Shortly after this, the Martin family sold this property and moved out of their nightmare farmstead and never returned. Summer 2007, Palmyra, Maine. A boyfriend, a girlfriend, and two of their close friends who loved to also explore and camp like themselves are out in a very dense area looking around. After a long day of expedition, the couple and their two friends decide it's time to set up camp for the night in a dense patch of the forest. Exhausted from their day of exploration, the group easily falls fast asleep inside their cozy tent. Sometime during the early hours of the morning, the female of the group is awoken to the sounds of snarls and wolf-like howls coming from somewhere outside of the tent and in the darkness of the night. The girl told the men that she believed there was something that looked like the silhouette of walking wolves in the moonlight coming through the tent. Panicking, the girl then frantically tries to wake up her boyfriend, who is still sleeping. As he clumsily wakes up and is trying to comprehend what the other two men are trying to understand, they all seem to be pretty annoyed with her and tell her she needs to relax so that they can go back to bed. No sooner had they said this, they themselves begin to hear the same sounds that she had been describing to them, and also begin seeing the same walking wolf shadows. Quickly opening the tent, they shine their flashlight out and see a group of what looked like werewolves standing on the border of the tree line. And the group of friends panic and make a quick dash for their pickup truck. And as they drive to the closest person's house, they know it's not until the next day that they get the courage to go back and try to gather their camping gear. And upon arrival, they discover their campsite is destroyed and their two tents are shredded to pieces, along with all their sleeping gear. The girlfriend, as well as two of the friends, refused to even get out of the truck, and the boyfriend had to go and gather everyone's stuff. Summer 2007, Moosehead Lake, Maine, remote cabin, 60 miles northwest of Palmyra. A woman is outside playing with her dogs at dusk. Walking inside to use the bathroom, she notices her husband, who is playing his guitar, has abruptly stopped mid-song. Upon exiting the restroom, her husband has a look of bewilderment on his face. The woman said her husband was as pale as a ghost. After getting her husband to talk, the man said he was looking out the window as he was playing away on his guitar, only to see a huge black wolf slowly walking by and making direct eye contact with him, proceeding to tell his wife the eyes were big and red with the look of a. The woman told her husband it couldn't have been a wolf, that wolves don't walk on two legs, and that there hasn't been a documented case of a wolf in Maine for a while. It must have been a black bear, because this is a 6-foot window, meaning the animal would have to be at least 8 feet tall, and only a bear can potentially walk on two legs for a few moments. Fearing the bear would attack her dogs, the woman scrambled to let them in, and as she opened the door, they bolted in with their ears pinned back. Looking around the whole entire area, the woman sees no sign of a bear or any animal activity that her husband had mentioned, so she returns back inside. Around 3 weeks later, her husband again sees the creature and tells her about it. His wife says her husband is a very skeptical person, and that if he saw something and it scared him that much, she believes the description he gave her of the animal is 100% correct. 2011, Washington County, Maine. 2 registered nature and wildlife guards are out hunting on a friend's private property one afternoon. As they are hunkered down watching a game trail, they are bewildered to see a dark black, muscular, human-like dog creature with pointy ears and long, lanky arms and a massive mane and shaggy tail walk out of some brush nearby. The men said the animal walked around, hunched over, sniffing the air for a few minutes before dropping down onto all fours and running off into the forest. April 2014, Northern Maine. A game warden is out making sure no one is poaching or trespassing. Parking his truck, he gets out to more thoroughly scope an area. As the warden is walking, all he can hear is the crunch of his boots on the snow. But everything else is dead silent. Scanning the area, he sees an enormous, black, wolf-like creature bolting towards a large black bear a few hundred yards away. Pulling out his rifle, the warden sees the two enormous creatures begin battling each other. He said the black bear began loudly growling before standing up on two legs and falling forward. Shortly after the bear began chewing the animal's leg, the dogman began violently slashing at the bear's face with its long, massive claws. Shrieking out in pain, the snow suddenly became red with blood of the bear as it quickly fell over. Still enraged by the fact it was bitten during the fight, the dogman picks up the black bear and throws it with tremendous force into a nearby tree. Completely terrified at this point, the warden raised his gun in the air, firing off a few rounds in an attempt to scare the beast off, which miraculously somehow worked, allowing the man to run back to his truck and drive away and tell us his encounter. July 2019, 12 a.m., Mountainside Cemetery, Georgetown, Maine. A local man named Robert is exploring an isolated part of the cemetery late one night, thinking it was a brilliant idea to enhance his opportunity to have an encounter with the unknown. He begins chanting some strange text he found within some old books he had been reading. As he is saying words, he obviously has no clue to the darkness they behold. Robert begins to hear strange whispering and sees fog begin emanating all around him. Intrigued, he begins to explore the cemetery further and suddenly starts to find enormous canine-like tracks all over the area. At this point, Robert is no longer intrigued, but is horrified and suddenly sees a 6 to 8 foot tall, jet black, human-like demon wolf creature with pointy ears and bright glowing eyes, staring at him from a short distance away, while suddenly pushing itself upright onto two large legs and walking towards him. Mortified now, Robert begins sprinting back towards his nearby car as the creature seemingly began laughing at him as he was screaming in horror. Once driving home, Robert told his wife what had occurred to him, and ever since this day, unfortunately, him and his wife have fallen on horrible times.
Thank you for everyone who once again stopped by the Fox Den tonight for another episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on StarFox Radio. If you do enjoy my content, please like, subscribe, and share it. Feed the algorithm. And guess what? I am so hungry, so it is time for me to feed. I will catch you on the next one.